Hey everyone, today we're starting a new unit on angle relationships. And this is a 8th grade topic. So this is brand new material. So I want to make sure you guys are watching these videos as we go through this unit. This unit also has a lot of new vocabulary words. There are a total of 7 new vocabulary words that I'm going to introduce to you today. But for the first couple days of this unit, we're really just going to take the time to go through the vocab words, look at the definitions, and a bunch of examples. All right, so let's look at our first vocabulary word. Our first vocabulary word are parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines that are in the same plane that do not intersect. So if we look at this picture here, the two parallel lines are line M and line N. Okay, so they have to be in the same plane, and a plane in math is just a two-dimensional space, but they can never intersect. That's the most important fact about parallel lines. Okay, which means they're never going to meet, they're never going to touch. Okay, they will never intersect. Our next vocabulary word is a transversal. A transversal is a line that intersects two parallel lines to form 8 angles. So we have the same picture here, but this line that is intersecting those two parallel lines is the transversal. We often say that that parallel lines are cut by a transversal. Okay? Again, an important fact about a transversal is that after it crosses through those two parallel lines, it then forms 8 angles. I have those 8 angles labeled for you with numbers. So as you can see on our first parallel line, that transversal cuts through and it forms angle 1, then it forms angle 2, then it forms angle 3, and angle 4. Then if we look at the second parallel line, it also forms angle 5, angle 7, angle 6, and angle 8, totaling 8 angles. Okay? Next vocabulary word is a familiar one from our previous unit. They're supplementary angles. Well, supplementary angles are two angles that the sum of their measures is 180 degrees. So that's the most important piece of information we have to memorize there, is that supplementary angles equal 180 degrees. So after that transversal cuts through those parallel lines, it forms supplementary angles. And I have those angles listed out for you over to the left. Now, next to each number, you're going to see a less than sign. The reason that less than sign is there is because that is the symbol that we use in math to represent an angle. I tell you all the time, mathematicians super lazy. They want to write like the least amount of things as possible. So that less than sign allows us to name an angle without actually having to write the word angle out. And the reason why we use a less than sign is simply because it looks like an angle. Okay, so we would read that as angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary. So these two angles, angle 1 and angle 2, are supplementary. Look, they're on that straight line. They're right next to each other. So together they have to equal 180 degrees. Okay, but we have more supplementary angles. Our next set of supplementary angles are angle 3 and angle 4. Again, they're on a straight line. Okay, they're right next to each other. So together their sum has to be 180. Okay, but we even have more supplementary angles just on that first parallel line. Angle 1 and angle 3 are also supplementary because they're on this straight line, which in this case is the transversal. Okay, right next to each other, so they have to add up to be 180. Also, angle 2 and angle 4 are supplementary angles. Okay, so there's 4 supplementary angles just on that first parallel line. Well, now let's look at our next parallel line. Angle 5 and angle 6 are supplementary, and angle 7 and angle 8 are supplementary. But we're not done. Angle 5 and 7 are supplementary, and angle 6 and 8 are also supplementary. Okay, so we have a total of 8 pairs of supplementary angles when we have 2 parallel lines that are cut by a transversal. Okay, so now let's do some practice identifying supplementary angles. So you guys, we're simply just going to write in the angles as a number, and you guys will type in the angles on the Google Slides. So I have 4 pairs written here for you. There are more than 4 pairs, so you might have different answers than I do, which is fine because there are a total of 8, but I'm only asking for 4. So the first pair of supplementary angles, I'm just going to look at my first parallel line. And I know that 7 and 8 must be supplementary angles. So angle 7 and angle 8 are supplementary. Okay, I'm going to go right below that. I also know that angle 5 and angle 6 are also supplementary. So angle 5 and angle 6. Now I could stay on that first parallel line and say 5 and 7 are supplementary, or 8 and 6, but I'm just going to go down to the next parallel line. And I know 2 and 3 are supplementary, and I know 1 and 4 are supplementary as well. So angle 2 and angle 3 are supplementary, and angle 1 and angle 4 are supplementary. Okay, again, there are others that you might have, which is absolutely fine. There are 4 more pairs of supplementary angles that we could have written. Okay, next vocab word is another familiar one, vertical angles. We must know that vertical angles are formed by the intersection of 2 lines, and they are congruent. So they're congruent angles formed by the intersection of 2 lines. Okay, remember, when we have vertical angles, the vertical angles are across from each other. They're across each other from that point of intersection. So if we look at this diagram, angle 1 and angle 4 are vertical angles, which means angle 1 is equal to angle 4. And angle 2 and angle 3 are vertical angles, which means they are also equal to each other. Okay, if we look at that second parallel line, angle 5, use a different color, angle 5 and angle 8 are vertical angles, which means they are equal to each other. And angle 6 and angle 7 are vertical angles, again, because they're opposite of each other, or on opposite sides of that point of intersection. So they're vertical, so they are equal to each other. Okay, so now again, let's do some practice identifying vertical angles in this diagram. All right, so I'm just going to start with the first line that I see. The first pair of vertical angles that I see is angle 7 and angle 6. Again, they are on opposite sides of each other. So angle 7 and angle 6 are vertical. Another pair of vertical angles is angle 5 and angle 8. So angle 8 and angle 5 are vertical angles. Now I'm going to look at that next line, and angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical angles, and angle 3 and angle 1 are vertical angles. Okay, so I'm going to write that in here. Angle 2 and 4 are vertical, and angle 1 and 3 are vertical. Okay, again, we need to remember that vertical angles are equal to each other. Okay, next couple of vocab words are brand new. First one is alternate interior angles. Okay, so sounds really fancy. Let's break this up into simpler language. What does the word alternate mean? Well, alternate means opposite, and interior means inside. And we know what angles means. So if we're looking at 2 parallel lines that are cut by a transversal, like in this diagram here, your alternate interior angles are your non-adjacent interior angles found on opposite sides of the transversal. So I labeled for you where the interior is in this diagram. When you hear the word interior, think inside. The interior is in the inside of those 2 parallel lines. Okay, so the angles that are considered interior angles are 3, 4, 5, and 6. Again, because they are inside those 2 parallel lines. But we want to determine what are the alternate interior angles. Well, that word alternate means opposite. And that opposite is coming from opposite sides of this transversal. Okay, so the angles have to be on opposite sides. So we can see that angle 3 and angle 6 are on opposite sides of that transversal. One is on the left side, one is on the right side. That makes angle 3 and angle 6 alternate interior angles. okay, because they're on the inside or the interior of those parallel lines, and they are on opposite or alternate sides of the transversal. Okay, then we have angle 5 and angle 4. Angle 5 and angle 4 are also on the interior of those parallel lines. They are also on alternate or opposite sides of the transversal, making angle 4 and angle 5 alternate interior angles. Okay, let's do some practice identifying alternate interior angles. So again, whenever we want alternate interior angles, we're looking at the interior or the inside or in between those two parallel lines. And we're looking for angles that are opposite on opposite sides of that transversal. So I labeled or I highlighted where the interior is of these two parallel lines. So the interior angles are 5, 6, 2, and 3. But I need the alternate interior angles. So I have to look at the angles or the pair that's going to be opposite of each other on that transversal. So angle 5 and angle 3 are on opposite sides of the transversal, making them alternate interior angles. So angle 5 and angle 3 are alternate interiors. Then angle 2 and angle 6 are also on opposite sides of the transversal, making angle 2 and angle 6 alternate interior angles. Okay. Next vocab word, alternate exterior angles. Okay, so the big difference here is the word exterior. So again, we're going to break this apart. Alternate still means opposite. Okay, and exterior now means outside. Okay, so alternate exterior angles are non-adjacent exterior angles found on opposite sides of the transversal. So they're still on opposite sides or alternate sides of the transversal. The only difference is the exterior. The exterior region is on the outside of those two parallel lines, and I highlighted where that region is. So the angles that are considered exterior are angle 1, 2, 7, and 8. Again, because they are on the outside of those two parallel lines. So now we need to identify which angles are on opposite sides. Well, angle 1 and angle 8 are on opposite sides of the transversal, making angle 1 and angle 2, making angle 1 and angle 8 alternate exterior angles. And then angle 2 and angle 7 are on opposite sides of the transversal and are located outside the parallel lines or in the exterior region, making angle 2 and angle 7 alternate exterior angles. Okay, so alternate exterior, outside and opposite sides of the transversal. So let's do some practice identifying alternate exteriors now. So again, I labeled those two exterior regions for you. All right, so I know my exterior angles are 7, 8, 1, and 4. So we just got to figure out which ones are opposite. Well, angle 7 and angle 4 are on opposite sides of the transversal. Angle 7 is on the left and angle 4 is on the right, making angle 7 and angle 4 alternate exterior angles. And then angle 8 and angle 1 are on opposite sides of the transversal, and they're in the exterior region, making angle 8 and angle 1 alternate exterior angles. Okay, last vocab word for today are corresponding angles. Okay, corresponding angles are angles that have the same position on two different parallel lines cut by a transversal. And very important to remember, corresponding angles are congruent. They're equal to each other. So when I say corresponding, they need to have the same position on the parallel lines. So we're kind of looking at these two parallel lines separately, the first one and the second one, and seeing which angles match up. So if we look at angle 1 here, angle 1 is on the top left in this diagram. It's on top of the parallel line and it's to the left of the transversal. Okay, so now I want to look at the second parallel line and see which angle is also on the top left. Well, the top left is right here, and that is angle 5, which means that angle 1 and angle 5 are corresponding angles. They are sitting in the same position just on two different lines. So they're corresponding, which also means that angle 1 is equal to angle 2. Or I'm sorry, angle 1 is equal to angle 5. Okay, now let's look at our first parallel line and look at angle 2. Angle 2 is located on the top right. Okay, so now I want to look on the second line and find which angle is also on the top right. Well, that angle on the second parallel line is angle 6, making angle 2 and angle 6 corresponding angles. So angle 2 is also equal to angle 6. They are corresponding. Okay, now we're going to look at the first line, but just the bottom of that. So now we have where the angle 3 is. That angle 3 is located on the bottom left. So now we're going to look at the second line and figure out which angle is also located on the bottom left. Well, the bottom left is angle 7. So that makes angle 3 and angle 7 corresponding angles, which also means angle 3 is equal to angle 7. Okay, and last but not least, we have this angle 4, which is on the bottom right. So now we want to look at the bottom right of our second line. Sorry, that was messy. Okay, so angle 4 and angle 8 are in the same position. They're both on the bottom right, just on different lines, making angle 4 and angle 8 corresponding angles, which also means angle 4 is equal to angle 8. Okay, so corresponding angles, they are in the same position, just on two different parallel lines. So now let's just do some more practice identifying corresponding angles. So I'm just going to start with the first line I see, which is the one on top. I first have an angle that is on the top and to the left, which is angle 7. Now I want to look at the second line and determine which other angle is on the top left, and that would be angle 2. So that means, angle 2 and angle 7 are corresponding angles. Okay, now I'm going to look at angle 8. This angle 8 is on the top right. So now I'm going to look at the second line and see which angle is also on the top right, and that would be angle 3, making angle 8 and angle 3 corresponding angles. Okay, now here we have the bottom left, which is angle 5. I'm now going to look at the second line. Angle 1 is on the bottom left, making angle 5 and angle 1 corresponding angles. And last but not least, this angle 6 is on the bottom right. Okay, and angle 4 is on the bottom right of that second line, making angle 6 and angle 4 corresponding angles, which means all of these pairs are going to be equal to each other. So angle 7 is going to be equal to angle 2, angle 8 is going to be equal to angle 3, angle 5 is going to be equal to angle 1, and angle 4 is going to be equal to angle 6. Okay, guys, I know that was a lot of new vocabulary words, but keep going over these definitions. It might be helpful to you to make flashcards so that you can memorize these types of angles and be able to identify them when you see them. What you guys are going to do now is complete the parallel line vocab assignment, which is going to have just examples that we did in this video, where you're going to identify alternate interiors, alternate exteriors, and corresponding angles, and some supplementary and vertical angles as well. All right, guys, like I said, I know this is brand new, so if you have any questions, please ask me, and I will respond immediately.